Virgil, Mike Jones, passed away. Referee Mike Charles III posted a few days ago now. My dear friends, it was with great sorrow that I bring news from the Jones family, the passing of our beloved Michael Jones, who we know and love as Virgil, Vincent, Soul Train Jones, and more. Virgil passed peacefully at the hospital this morning, and I ask that you pray for him and his family. May his memory be eternal. So Virgil had been dealing with quite a few health issues these last few years, suffered some strokes, dealing with dementia as well these last few years. And I can give more stories on Virgil later on down the line, but you shared a locker room with him originally in the WWF for a year and a half or a year, however long you were there.
Well, being from Pittsburgh, I knew Mike pretty well.
When did he start wrestling? When did he start wrestling on the Independents? Did you know him on the Independents before you got to WWF?
Tell you, I always forget the name of the town that Gary Dammer runs in West Virginia. Dominic had taken me one of the first shows that I'd ever gone on the road for. Taking me down, there was a guy named Buddy. Played one of the Moondogs, one of the lesser Moondogs, and he used to run shows down there. And we walk in, and like we were kids, snot-nosed babies, basically. And Mike walked in, and he had that whole Apollo Creed gimmick. I mean, he was built like a brick shithouse. I mean, he just looked pro, you know. And he came in, and me and him were in a tag match that night against, I'm guessing Mick and somebody else. And he came in, like, here's what we're gonna do. And it starts laying out it was like 25 spots. And then he proceeded to mess every single one of these spots up. Like a pretty quick taste of Virgil, right? But I'll say this for Mike, you know, about 5 years ago, Moose, Chris, my manager, had sent me and Dominic up to work with a promoter up in way upstate New York. And last minute he called and said, "Hey, can you bring Virgil?" And you know, Virgil in the car like that for that long ride, you know, going to be with each other like 3-4 days. And boy, this is going to be rough. And it was thoroughly enjoyable. I mean, I got to know a side of him that I never knew. His life story, his dad, a military guy. It just really was fascinating and an enjoyable trip with him. And I'm so glad now that we had that opportunity because, you know, Virgil gets derided for a lot of ways. And like I've always said, yeah, some things he does is unorthodox. But with what we know now about this industry, how it just sort of throws people away. I watched the other night the autopsy show, Last Hours of China. And, you know, boy, it's you know, a lot of brutal stuff in there. I mean, just, you know, the industry just puking her out. And, you know, after she was so iconic in the industry and made them so much money. Same thing with Virgil. One thing we have a thing called Rogers, Ohio, which is like sort of a, how do you describe it? It's sort of like a flea market type of thing, but they have, you know, fresh meat and farmers bring their vegetables, and it's just like a big, huge outdoor thing. It's on Fridays and Saturday mornings, and my mother used to take us there when we were kids years ago. And you know, the stories come out that Virgil would take a card table out there, open it up, and just start selling his picture. The one thing I will never do is disparage anybody for working hard. You know, doing what you have to do to cover your taking care of you. As long as what you're doing is legal, I've got no arguments and no jokes to make about you. And I think anybody that does probably needs to reassess because, you know, Virgil could have gone on welfare or whatever, I guess, you know, but, you know, would do that. And there were times I remember right around the time of that trip with Dominic, I had made an appearance in West Virginia with Moose, and the next morning flew to Boston. And when I got to the building in Boston, Virgil was there. He had been at the show the night before in West Virginia, and he had driven up overnight to get up there. How can you make fun of a guy that's going to spend 14, 15 hours in a car with no sleep to go make a living? I have trouble, you know, finding, you know, humor in that or something to poke at. I had interviewed him for Appalachian Championship Wrestling, and there was a noticeable difference in the cognition from that trip that Dominic and I had with him a few years before. My guess is he had probably suffered a few TIAs, transient ischemic attacks, which are mini strokes, because you could see like his cognition was starting to go. He was also having great difficulty using his arms, which my guess would be something, cervical or spinal. But you could see a noticeable decline in him. And we were at, 6, 8 months ago, if that, at a convention in Kentucky. And I heard yelling, and I looked over, and Virgil was just yelling at people walking by his table. I think the dementia, dementia patients can get angry and riled up. And it was really sad, because again, I think when I heard of his passing, and I thought the first image that popped into my head was that first day I met him, and he was a stud. I mean, he was just built, had just this beautiful build, and that whole red, white, and blue Apollo Creed get up, and I mean, he just oozed professional wrestling. And like I said, that night, then I see the real Virgil, right? That we all know and love. Virgil's a good guy. I can't say anything bad about him. I think he loved wrestling. Always wanted to be around it. And I think a lot of the stories and the memes that we hear about Virg are probably more based on his habits. He liked to gamble. He'd go to the casino down in Pittsburgh and gamble. I'd hear umpteen stories every night. I saw Virgil down at the casino. And well, that's what he wants to do with his money. That's his prerogative, right? I mean, who might tell him how to spend his money? But the first thing that popped out at me when I read this was it was being reported at 61 years old, and I knew that he was. It wasn't like he's 100 years older than us, but I mean, with that first meeting, again, we were children, basically children, young, and he walked in and he was notably older than us. And I saw somebody put a correction out and said that he was 11 years older than what had been reported. And as soon as I thought it, I thought, at least now I know I'm not crazy, right? Because he was, those memories are pretty driven into my brain, tattooed in there. Him walking, I can still see him walking through that door, that black, beautiful body just walking in, and that get up. I was like, oof, this guy's a star. It was, and he found his way around wrestling, and that's the thing to me about wrestling. Like for the people that want to take those shots at Virg, he somehow, with very limited talent, he was able to ascend into the WrestleMania realm. And again, you can make jokes about this or that. There's a lot of people on the planet that if you say, "Hey, would you want that spot?" You think, you'd be $1 million man. Hell yeah, count me in. I'll take that spot. So for all the jokes that certain people will make about Virg, he got himself to the dance, and and that the thing about wrestling to me is that it really is. You see a lot of people with incredible talent that somehow don't make it, and other people with lesser talent figure out some way to meander themselves up that ladder. Virg is part of the wrestling universe history, right? He's ensconced there. So sad to see him go, but I will say this: the last time I saw him, he was having so much trouble that he needed help going to the bathroom because his arms weren't working and stuff. And I remember thinking to myself, this is not living. It's really rough when you see somebody again as that first image of Mike Jones in my brain, and then seeing this guy that had whittled down and having all these health problems and cognitive problems. It's I was just talking to my friend's mother yesterday and talked about how difficult it is as a child when you watch what you consider to be your superhuman parents just sort of just whittle away, and it's really one of life's tough lessons. It's the natural order of things, but it's one of life's tough lessons. And because I'd known Virg for most of my life, I was probably 17, 18 when I first met him, and and here we are, 4.5 decades later, And we're talking about his passing, and the guy found success in wrestling that a lot of people give their eye teeth for and never attain, and left a lot of memories for those of us that knew him. It left a lot of good and bad memories, But a lot, Birds was memorable. Like, he was going to stick in your brain if you ever met him, and I'm just glad to see that, like the way I saw him suffering in the end, that that his passing was easy, and he's found rest on the other side. It's sad, but it's a lot better than me seeing him have that kind of difficulty just getting through the mundanities of the day. It's sad, but again, natural order of things.